Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co host, Kraig Bowers. Purdue gets McNeese in round two of March Madness. McNeese just beat Clemson. They win by two. They are up by like 20 something at some point in the game. Clemson clawed their way back and did have a chance to win. I'm looking at it now. Clemson scored 38 points in the final 10 minutes. They scored 13 total points in the first half. So, this McNeese team is interesting. We'll dive into everything that you need to know, Kraig. I'll throw to you just your overall thoughts or kind of what you want to get into.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a really impressive win by them in the first round over a Clemson team that beat Duke, right? Earlier this
Yep.
season. We're in control just pretty much right out of the jump and then kind of let it get close at the end. But the game still wasn't really in question. I think as we just look at this team high level, and I'll be really interested to hear what you have to say about them in terms of scheme and whatnot. But kind of feels like the inverse of the High Point game, right? That the High Point was like, oh, we have to worry about what they're going to do offensively, and this team might put up 80. But they can't play defense, and this feels like a flip in that where a McNeese team that can get really physical is going to turn people over. Certainly going to get after you on the defensive end, but maybe doesn't have the offensive skill that you see from some of the Power Five type programs. And another old team, another team with a lot of transfers. Unlike High Point, coming into this game, you know a little bit more about what they can do against Power Five conference type teams because they had some early on in the season in their schedule. They play Bama, they lose by 8. They play Mississippi State, they lose by 3. A couple of other teams in the field are, I guess, at least one. They lose to Liberty in a neutral court, 62-58. So they didn't pull off any wins really against those tournament level top 5 or Power 5 type teams, but they played them close. So they're not going to come in and just be shocked by playing a Big Ten team in terms of the physicality and athleticism that you might face against them. So I guess first of all, just what do you expect this McNeese team to look like defensively, offensively as Purdue prepares for them tomorrow?
So yeah, pretty much all year they've been a team defensively that switches everything. They will switch, they'll triple switch, that's just what they do. They got a lot of dudes between 6'4" and 6'8", athletic, long, like no true real bigs. I guess 6'9" Joe Charles is, but he's right. He's only 6'9". And then yesterday they just came out in a 2-3 zone, and like they really haven't done that all year long, and it just messed with Clemson. So now you're right when you're prepping this game, it's like, well, I guess you kind of have to prepare for that as well now too. And it's a 2-3 zone that was aggressive. They want to force turnovers. They want to be physical. They want to get up and just speed you up and control the pace of the game that way. Not that they're a crazy fast team by any means, but just make you be uncomfortable for 30 seconds on the off when you have the ball on offense. That is what they want to do. It is what they are very, very good at. It Their defense forces a lot of ISOs and things like that. So it's a big time. Like Braden's got to make his shots. TKR's got to be good in the post. But then also they are a defense that they allow a ton of 3-point attempts. They like right. They're going to switch everything, but they also provide a lot of help at the rim too on the backside. So that means those skip pass kickouts to Lawyer, CJ, Jakari, Colvin, Heidi, like though they got to be able to knock them down. And then flipping it, they honestly, when I was going back through the film, they I don't know if you can see my dog. He just made an appearance, I think. Um, um, Offensively, they run a lot more stuff than I expected. A lot of pin downs, a lot of handoffs, zoom actions, different type of screening things. At their core, they want to get downhill and to the rim. That is what they are do their best. They're, I think, number 2 in the entire country in terms of, or number 12. No, I don't know. I'm not even looking at them. I'm looking at a different team. I think they're like they're top 5 in terms of rim rate of being able to just take quantity of shots at the rim. And they do a really, really good job of it. So that's what they want to do at their core is just get downhill, get to the rim, be physical, draw fouls, and just kind of use their athleticism to create those advantages.
Yeah, and to that point, 19th in the country in terms of turnover percentage. And I realize if you're like fact checking me on Ken Baum today. I didn't update these numbers after the last 8 games yesterday. So they're going to be close, right? So
Yeah.
21.5% turnover rate from a defensive standpoint, ranked 13th in the country in terms of steal percentage. But the thing that jumped off the page to me, what you said, they're going to give up a lot of 3-point shots. And to me, that means if you're a TKR and they're providing help down low, you got to make the right read, right? Trust your teammates. When that's there, skip it out, kick it out. Don't feel like you got to win it on your own. We saw Cam knock down some threes yesterday. We saw Jakari settle in and knock down a three. Miles didn't connect yesterday, but we know both Miles and CJ are capable of it. And then obviously Fletch is going to be Fletch. So I think that's a really big thing in the game. Make sure we take care of the basketball, make the right read, trust teammates to knock down outside threes that are there. Is there anything high level where outside of that, what I just talked about, where you can see Purdue kind of making their hay on the offensive or defensive end against this team? Because this team will turn the ball over some too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think right offensively, I think we've kind of covered it. Like Braden and TKR got to be good, and then guys got to be willing or not willing, able to knock down perimeter shots. Defensively, if they like it's just going to be stay in front. Like if they can stay in front a lot and their communication has to be good, like that's when McNeese is not afraid to put up some wild shots. And if you can stay in front, if you can communicate well, that's when you can force them to do that. Now on top of that, half to defensive rebounds, like half to defensive rebounds. I said on my preview on my Substack where I broke down, the film or the offense and defense film for McNeese, like with how McNeese plays and the energy that they can build for themselves, an offensive rebound putback can feel like 4 points, even though it's only two, just because of how they can turn it into more stops and more buckets. So that'll be the other thing. Have to defensive rebounds, which Purdue stayed in front yesterday and defensive rebounded very well yesterday. So I understand it's a different team, but they have good momentum, I guess, on it.
Yeah, and to that point, McNeese coming in ranked about 38th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. I was sitting right next to the High Point head coach, essentially. He was right to my left the entire game yesterday. And every time Purdue would get an offensive rebound in like that last 10 minutes of the second half, it was like you could feel the soul leave their bodies. Like they were just so deflated. They would get a stop and feel like they had some momentum to go the other way. And then boom, that ball comes off. Purdue gets it back. Sometimes got it back a second time. So I think you're right. Just from an energy and positivity standpoint for Purdue, they've got to limit McNeese, not let them get those second chances. And then on the other end, I think Purdue has to do that, right? On the flip side of that, McNeese ranks like 262nd in terms of offensive rebounds given up. So Purdue has a chance again to go ahead and potentially, make some hay on that standpoint and get some more second chance opportunities there. Looking at just kind of diving into some of the players here. I know we're wanting to keep this one shorter today. Just kind of looking at their starters. You've got Javon Garcia, a transfer previously from UMass, averaging 12.9 points per game, a 6'2" senior guard. Christian Shoemate from Tulsa, averaging 10.5 points and 6.3 rebounds, a 6'6" senior guard, transfer from Tulsa. DJ Richards, 10.1 points a game, 2.2 rebounds, a 6'5" guard from University of Texas San Antonio. And then if you watched Syracuse before, Kadir Copeland, transfer from there and averaging 9 points, 3.3 rebounds a game. And Joe Charles, a senior forward at 6'7" as their starters, a transfer from Louisiana, averaging 8.7 points and 7.1 rebounds a game. As you look at those starters, and there's some big time bench players that come off too, not a really deep rotation, but the contributions they do get from some of their bench players feel more like starter contributions. I guess just go where you want to go from that starter list in terms of talking about what they're going to look like.
Yeah, I'll start with the easy one. DJ Richards, shooter. Like, do not let him shoot the ball. 43% on nearly 200 attempts this season. Do not let him shoot the ball. It's number 2. Joe Charles is really the other main shooter, number 5. He's 36% on good volume. They have a couple guys like Garcia is 33% on decent volume. Brandon Murray, who's a bench guy, he's 35% on low volume. Right, they aren't like an awesome 3-point shooting team, but they have some dudes that can knock it down. And then beyond that, like they are definitely a team that has just multiple guys, as you mentioned, that can kind of go create. Garcia, Copeland, they're both going to have the ball in their hands, run pick and roll. They're both pretty effective in it, want to get downhill, want to get to the rim, use that athleticism and physicality. Um, right. And I think those are like Garcia, Parker, Shoemate, Richards, they're all 10 plus points. Copeland's 9, Joe Charles 8, Murray 7. Like it is just very balanced scoring. And I do think a lot of them want to do similar things, except for like, Joe Charles is a big that'll pick and pop. DJ Richards is a guard that's going to shoot. And then the other three or other four really are all kind of similar to me in terms of just really want to get downhill, want to slash. They're a pretty good cutting team as well. So like, you know, they're McNeese is not opposed to just ISO and right go one on one and use their athleticism, but it's not like they don't run stuff and like they still have good offensive movement within that. So that and I really do think it kind of just applies across the board. The only I think other thing to point out is Kadir Copeland is like the main facilitator, one of the highest assist rates in the country. Also, though, can get a little wild and turn the ball over a bit. Has a pretty high turnover rate as well. So, as you mentioned, right, this team can turn the ball over. Copeland is a guy that is a prime example of that. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how they match up. Copeland 6'6", Garcia 6'3", Richard 6'4". I would assume that means CJ on Copeland, which right it's not like we haven't seen CJ have success against these bigger matchups, but still is going to be, I assume, on a bigger matchup this time.
Yeah. And just kind of as I was digging into them and looking a little bit more, I obviously got to watch the second half yesterday. Another thing that just jumped out to me is 4 out of these 5 starters average a steal or more per game. So multiple guys that can disrupt on the defensive end. So it's not like, oh, you got these 2 guys that are really going to pressure you, more of a system and everybody being able to pressure the ball. So definitely going to have to take care of the ball. For me, outside of like Charles and Richards, right? This team isn't a bad 3-point shooting team. They're not a great 3-point shooting team, but it really feels like they're carried by Richards and Charles in that regard. Like outside of that, you're kind of really wanting to force those guys to shoot a 3 first and not let them have a step to get by you, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah. Looking at the bench, then I guess obviously Sincere Parker coming in averaging 12.1 points, 2.5 rebounds a game, a transfer for 1 point from St. Louis. And then you got a couple of other guys a little bit deeper in the bench too. I guess who do you want to highlight specifically there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sincere Parker's the guy you have to he's second leading scorer. In only 20 minutes a game, he's averaging 12 points. Not a good shooter, but again, he is just a guy that can get downhill, can get all the way to the rim, and has been very effective at that. Like it is, I don't really care too much what your efficiency is. If you're averaging 12 points a game in less than 20 minutes, like that in itself to me is pretty impressive. He's good from the mid range. Like he is a guy that will get to the pull up, will get to the mid range. This isn't a team in general that takes a ton of mid range. Him and Garcia are really the only two I think you like really have to worry about from that area. Um, I mentioned Brandon Murray is like a guy that he is the only other guy that's like sort of a consistent shooter. 35%. Like definitely don't want to leave him open. Brian Celebange is kind of or Brian Celebange is kind of their backup big, but he's 6'8", 225. Like right, I think he's a very good rebounder, and that's the biggest thing that he brings is very good activity on the glass, not too much high usage, right? Lots of putbacks, lots of just shots around the rim offensively. This isn't like a crazy deep team like High Point, but as we mentioned, their bench will be able to be productive.
Yeah, and obviously a team that has some size and length in terms of perimeter players, wings, and that sort of thing. But in terms of the true post, this is not a big team, right? Their biggest guy's 6'8", 6'8", 6'9", depending on where you look at the listing. It feels like this is a matchup to me where if you've got a 6'11" Caleb First, you got TKR down there. Even if Will Berg gets some minutes, like you've got to take advantage of the size disparity that you have in those post players as well in this game.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it off the top. TKR has to be smart with his decision making, but like if McNeese is going to stay 1-on-1, he's got to be TKR and settle in. And we saw him. It took a few minutes the first time or against High Point, but then he settled in and was 10 of 16. Um, they're going to need that for sure. And yeah, whether Berg and First get post touches or even just if they can find a way to be active on the offensive glass once again, right? First had his only points were put back. Berg had the put back that was probably a pass, but still was in the spot to be able to grab the ball. Um, those things add up, especially against a team like McNeese. Like if McNeese is on a run, you get an offensive rebound and put it back. That kind of can kill momentum quick.
Yeah, and that's more where I was going with that in terms of using that size disparity. Not like we need to be throwing straight up post ups to Willie Berg and Caleb First in the second round of the NCAA tournament, but impose your will on the offensive glass, get some putbacks, be physical, and be vertical on the defensive end as well. So interesting matchup to me. Before I ask you your key to the game and before I offer my keys to the game, watching what he does, Will Wade, in that matchup yesterday, the first thing that popped into my head was like, he's going to draw something up to get the ball out of Braden's hand. Like he's showing that he's willing to do specific things defensively depending on the matchup. Like, is there any thought in your mind like, oh, he's going to come out and he's going to trap hard or he's going to really high hedge and just try to not let Braden beat him?
I would think that they stick with like they're just aggressive switching and just trust their guys to play 1-on-1 and show help. But like I said, they came out in a 2-3 zone. They haven't really done that all year. And like they just came out and it worked. So like I don't have the exact answer of he might go to this, but like it wouldn't shock me now if they go to another 2-3 zone because it was effective and right in theory that takes away Braden and TKR's two-man game because it's a lot more difficult to run that against a zone. In theory, it can kind of mitigate some of TKR's posts. So, right, I'm with you. Like, I don't know what it might be exactly. It could be something crazy. It could be just going back to 2-3 or just being crazy aggressive. But yeah, Will Wade is one of those coaches that's shown he will try different things.
All right, your keys to the game. What does Purdue need to do offensively, defensively to win this one?
First, like my first key is just stay composed. Like Purdue is the better team, is the higher ranked team for a reason. McNeese is a very good team. Do not get me wrong. McNeese is awesome at energy and athleticism and just kind of punking teams, like just burying them. Purdue cannot let that happen, obviously. Like they have to stay composed, even if they give up a 6-0, 8-0 run. Like, all right, just like they did against High Point. High Point cuts the lead to 3. Purdue quickly got it back to 10. Just being able to kind of withstand those punches, really to me is key number 1. Key number 2 kind of goes with it. Defensive rebounding, as always. And then from there, I think just being able to knock down perimeter shots. If that happens, then it's going to put if Purdue is having one of those games where they're 40 45% from 3, which they've shown that they can do. They're 38% on the year. If that happens in addition to the first two things I said, I think McNeese is going to be in a very big bind.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you on the composure thing. I think to me, this is one of those matchups where you have to come in and just realize they're going to throw some punches and they're going to turn you over at times. It's going to happen. So if you're TKR, if you're Braden, you have to just kind of accept when that happens, like, all right, next play. Now let's be smart with the basketball. The next play, go ahead and play through it. I'll just throw on beyond what you said. Obviously, just limiting turnovers. I think if Purdue, has 12 or less turnovers in this game, that's obviously going to be a positive for this team and increase their chances of winning. And the other side, I'll just go back to it. I think the people that are going to have the ball in their hands are most, so Braden Smith and TKR, with how this team's going to want to play and the fact that they leave three-point shooters open, got to make the right decisions of when to force the issue and when to trust everybody else around you and make that swing pass, make that kick pass, and let everybody else on this Purdue team have the opportunity to help you win this game as well. and then knocking
Yeah.
them down. And then they
Yeah,
have to
for
knock them down, right? That's another thing to go with it as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I guess the other one, just like try to just stay in front better, like just like
Yep.
how it was against High Point, stay in front better defensively because that's also going to make things better. But yeah, they tip off. They have the early game. I believe it is a 12:10 Eastern time
Yep.
tip off on CBS. So early game, it is kind of nice. It's nice for us that we'll have to do the post game show, but it's the only game going on, so it's like we aren't really going to miss much of the action. Everybody that tunes into the post game show, you also won't miss much of the action. Um, but yeah, we'll be live after the show. I believe right after the buzzer, me and Braggs will be on, and then Kraig will hop on whenever he's done with Presser and kind of able to get to a spot where he can record. Should be a good one. Purdue has a chance to go to the Sweet 16. Got to just figure out a way to win, right? Don't care if they win by 1. Don't care if they win by 35. Just figure out a way to win. Come back to Indy, play a Sweet 16 game, and we'll see what happens from there. Appreciate everybody tuning in, though. Make sure to like and subscribe on the way out, and we will see you post game live right after the buzzer as Purdue takes on McNeese.